Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. I'm Roberta Foster, and today I welcome Sarah Loudin Thomas to Author's Corner. She has written the book These Blue Mountains, which is published by Bethany House, a division of Baker Publishing Group, and she'll tell you more about how to find the book and other resources of hers at the end of the program. Let me give you a little insight into Sarah's background. She is the author of numerous acclaimed novels, including The Finder of Forgotten Things, The Right Kind of Fool, and the winner of the 2021 Selah Book of the Year. She has worked in public relations for Biltmore Estate for 6 years, and you'll see that in importance of that as we get into the interview. She's now the director of Jan Karen's Mitford Museum in Hudson, North Carolina. A native of West Virginia, she and her husband live in Western North Carolina. And so, Sarah, thank you so much for being with us on Author's Corner.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. This is such a treat.
So, as I was reading the book, I was taken with the uniqueness of the backstory. And so, tell us how you came to learn about this, and I guess you better explain what the this is.
Yes. So, this is one of those instances where I had been writing another book and found a really intriguing piece of history that didn't fit. And I think this is something historical authors often run into, is you find pieces that aren't going to work in the current novel, so you put it off to the side. You say, I'm going to come back to that. Well, I did come back to this story. I had been researching the flood of 1916 in Western North Carolina, and learned about, yes, that was for the book These Tangled Threads. But I learned about this prisoner of war camp in Hot Springs, North Carolina. And I had no idea that during World War I, there were prisoner of war camps, not for soldiers, but for civilians. So this was a camp where German sailors who happened to be on a ship in U.S. waters when war broke out with Europe, they were invited to stay, and they were placed into a camp in Hot Springs. And what was really intriguing was that they built an entire Bavarian village out of flood debris.
Wow.
So that 1916 flood had washed, there's branches and wood, and houses had been destroyed, and so there was boards, and they just took all this leftover debris, and they built, I'm talking 2-story chalets. They built a carousel that had gondolas, and it actually went around. They built a small church. So I thought, well, this is fascinating. I'm gonna write a book about this. And I thought I was writing a book about that village and these German men who were interred there. But I found a book called The German Invasion of Western North Carolina by Jacqueline Painter. It's out of print now, but I found a copy, ordered it, and got it. And there on page, 4 or 5, was this story. And what happened was that it was a German woman whose brother had been one of those sailors. She and her family knew that he had been taken into were taken into custody. They thought he'd been sent to North Carolina, and they thought he was probably dead, but they didn't know. And it had just been hanging over them all these years. So here she is in the 1930s. She opens a magazine, and there's a photograph of the German ambassador to America laying a wreath on a monument to sailors who died in a typhoid outbreak in an internment camp in North Carolina. And in the front of that picture, on a little white cross, is her brother's name.
Oh.
And that's how she finally found out what had happened to him. So I just said, oh, my gosh, I can't write a story that compelling. So I said, well, I'm going to pick this one up and use this for my novel. And so it's set in the 1930s, and I switched up to a German woman whose fiancé goes missing. And she's been pining away for 15 years. She sees this photograph, and she decides to find out if this really is her Fritz, who has been missing all these years.
Wow. Well, that is certainly a gifted backstory.
I know. It's like...
and just to have a true history take place on U.S. soil like that. So just out of curiosity, is any of that village still exist?
No, and that's so sad. There's amazing pictures of it. You can go online, you can Google this German Bavarian village in western North Carolina, and the pictures are incredible. But it was completely destroyed after the war was over. I think there was some anti-German sentiment, and it just it's completely gone. You can still go to Hot Springs. Actually, they need you to come to Hot Springs because they were hit hard by Helene last year. Mm-hmm. But it's completely gone now, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, today I'm talking with Sarah Loudin Thomas regarding her book, These Blue Mountains, which is published by Bethany House, a division of Baker Publishing Group. And you're listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. So we know that there's the German POWs and all of that. How does the main character, the woman character, how does she fit into your storyline?
So Hedda is, she's in Germany. She is actually taking care of Fritz, her fiancé's mother, who's very ill. And she's just kind of taken this on as her life. And she's never really moved on after losing Fritz. So when she finds the picture and she thinks, well, this is, and I gave him a very common name, so there could be a little bit of doubt. And she says, well, I think this is him. And his mother says, you have to go find out. She travels to America. And this was another instance where the real history conveniently worked for me. They did at one point disinter the bodies and move them to Tennessee. So she gets here just in time for that, and she arranges to take Fritz's body home. She's going to finally return him to Germany. Mm-hmm. But when they disinter the body, the coffin, he's not in it.
Uh-oh.
There's a woman's body
Uh-oh.
in it. Nobody knows who it is or why she's there. She should not have been there. So now Hedda has two mysteries. What happened to Fritz? Mm-hmm. And who's this woman in his casket?
And your storyline brings in another character named Garland, and
Garland.
They start there's a relationship forming there, but how did that develop and create more mystery?
Well, in part, it was because I needed someone on American soil to be her friend. But Garland was a guard in the camp where Fritz was held. So he actually is the one who buried the coffin that it turns out has the wrong body in it. So he's up to his neck in this mystery, and he knew there was something not right that night, but he didn't ask questions, and he's carrying some guilt and some shame, and he wants to help Hedda figure this out. Also, she's a lovely young German woman, and he's got a little bit of a crush going on. So there's a touch of romance. I do not write romantic fiction per se, but there is a touch of romance in this.
Yeah. Well,
and of course, Fritz is still out there too. We don't know what happened to him, so it's I guess there's a love triangle, but we don't know if the third person in the triangle is even still alive.
This is an uplifting mystery, so yes. It keeps your attention anyway. Tell us about the faith in your different characters. What's their faith like, and how does that help them go through this trial or this mystery?
Well, both Garland and Hedda have kind of let their faith lapse. The character who comes into the story who really brings the strongest faith element is the character who you probably like the least and would expect it the least of, which I love doing that because I just love how God works through the hard things and the difficulties of our lives. And so the character who really brings that faith in and reminds everyone of what life is about and what life, the important things in life really are, is a character who I can almost promise most readers don't care for. But I'm not going to tell you who.
I was saying, you're doing a real good job of dancing around that. So, okay, so as you are plotting out your story, what is it that you hope readers will take away from reading your book, These Blue Mountains?
one of the things I really wanted to touch on here was just this experience of being an immigrant. So Hedda has come to America on a travel visa. She thinks she's coming just to collect the body and go home. And she actually leaves Germany right before Hitler is named chancellor. So while she's in America, he becomes chancellor. And, of course, the news out of Germany is pretty rough in those days.
Yeah.
And she's beginning to see really bad things happening in her country. And she hears from her Fritz's mother, she hears the difficulties, and she has some Jewish friends. And she begins to think, maybe I don't want to go back to Germany. But then how does she stay? And how does she stay legitimately? And she gets in a little bit of trouble with her travel visa and the authorities. So I wrestled with that a little bit, the sense of belonging and where do you belong, and what happens when the place that you thought of as home doesn't feel like home anymore. So that was interesting to explore. And, of course, immigration is a very hot-button topic in America these days. So I tried to be very careful, and I'm not pushing any agenda here. I just wanted to explore what it might feel like to be a person out of place and out of time.
And there's another twist that you write about in the book, and we'll leave that unmentioned for the time being, too. But like you said, it's a book with mystery and intrigue. Every time you finish the chapter, something happens in the next one. So it's a very compelling novel. When you start reading it, it won't take you long because you'll devote the rest of your day to reading it, probably. I hear this from authors frequently. I was surprised by such and such, and I'm like, aren't you the writer? How can you be surprised by something? That still doesn't make sense to me, but perhaps you can tell us, were you surprised by anything that came up in your writing of the book?
Yes, I was definitely surprised, and I can't tell you the surprise because I hope it surprises readers too. But I will tell you, there was one, so you had mentioned in the intro, The Right Kind of Fool, which I know authors aren't supposed to have a favorite book, but that actually is my favorite book because that book is about a 13-year-old boy who's deaf. And you talk about an interesting point of view to write from. But there's a murder mystery in that one, and I knew who had committed the murder. Like when I started writing it, I knew who killed the man. I was all very clear cut. And my editor even said to me at one point, he's like, I don't know. People are not going to be super happy about this. I was like, that's too bad. That's who did it. And I got to about 3/4 of the way through the book, and all of a sudden I said, I called out to my husband in the other room. I was like, he didn't do it. And I was so relieved because I didn't much like it either. But it just, as I wrote the story, as it unfolded, I said, oh my gosh, there's a much better way for this to unfold that's going to take the reader surprise. It took me by surprise, and it's going to be more satisfying. So, we can plot and plan. It's just like life. You make your plans, and God just laughs and laughs and says, you go for it. This is how it's actually going to unfold.
Okay. All righty. Well, I've had the pleasure today of talking with Sarah Loudin Thomas about her book, These Blue Mountains. So, Sarah, tell our listeners how they can find out more about this book and others that you've written, and if you have any resources for people to connect with you about.
So, on my website, which is just sarahloudinthomas.com, I have a list of all my books. I have some reader, book club guides that go with several of my books. Also, if you scroll to the bottom of any page on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter, and I send those out. I aim monthly, but I don't always get it done. And then, of course, my books are available basically anywhere books are sold, but I definitely encourage you to go to your local independent bookstore. Okay.
And can you give us any insight into what you're working on for the next release?
Absolutely. So the next novel is also set in Western North Carolina, and it's another bit of interesting history I found when I was researching that flood of 1916. It's set in Lake Toxaway, North Carolina, and I discovered that Lake Toxaway, which is a beautiful resort area with a beautiful boutique hotel. People go there, travel there. It sat empty for 40 years.
Oh.
It survived the flood, but about a month after the flood, the dam had been weakened, and suddenly one afternoon, it just gave way.
Oh, my.
And sent billions of gallons of water from Lake Toxaway, North Carolina, all the way into South Carolina. My main character is a young woman who, well-to-do young lady, who married a young man who speculated in the stock market. He came from nothing. He made his wealth overnight, and it starts at the end of 1929, so you can guess what happens to the wealth he made overnight.
Yeah.
He loses all of that, and they end up in Lake Toxaway trying to start over dirt poor with literally nothing to their names. And there's lots of interesting things. So that comes out in May of 2026.
Okay. So today we've been talking about These Blue Mountains, and the author is Sarah Loudin Thomas. We certainly thank Bethany House for giving us a copy of the book to talk about. Sarah, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I love talking about books.
All right. Well, to our listeners, if you'd like to hear this interview again or share it with another, you can find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.